My name's Brian Smith. I'm a product manager, and with me today is Peter Imming. He's also a product manager. We both work for Symantec in the data protection area. I'm going to speak a little bit about NetBackup today, and Peter's going to speak about BackupExec and talk about how using our latest releases will not only introduce you to those features, but also talk about how using them today can position you for using the cloud in the future. And we also, this is an award-winning session, or it could be. It's got the longest title, I believe. So, a prescriptive approach for VM protection today and strategies to help you migrate to the cloud tomorrow. And I kind of spoke already about what we'll cover. I'll go through the first half of the presentation, bringing us through Symantec and Symantec NetBackup and the latest release, and then I'll hand it over to Peter, and he'll pick up with BackupExec's latest release and kind of carry through to the end. And since it is a small group here today, very much welcome to just raise your hand and ask a question as it comes to mind, and we'll try to answer them on the fly. We really haven't reserved any time at the end for Q&A, but we'll be around after the session as well. Just for fun here, are any of you BackupExec users today? Okay, and how about NetBackup users? All right, and any not using the products just yet? Okay, well, I hope we can answer your questions and teach you something a little bit new about our current releases. So when Pete and I, we do a lot of these shows and get out in front of a lot of customers and VMware customers like yourself, and when we do, it's kind of a foregone conclusion that one of the nice things about using VMware and virtual machines is they're so easy to deploy. But in a way, joking here, but in a way they are a little bit like cute rabbits, because if you're really not paying attention, these virtual machines can proliferate pretty quickly. And I know we all try to have business practices and things that put us as administrators in tight control of that. But because it essentially is just storage and taking a new virtual machine, as long as you have storage, your users and your other administrators can continue to proliferate these machines. So it poses some problems that strain or exercise your existing business practices. I'll just kind of ask a question of how many people use the typical backup agents and clients in the virtual machines themselves. Okay, and that's kind of to me, that's kind of the old-fashioned approach, or just the traditional approach of taking agents that work in physical machines and deploying them in virtual machines. And why do we do that? Well, we do it because really, it doesn't mean we don't have to go to a lot of work to do that, but it's part of this proliferation problem. We already have those defined, all the paperwork and all the bureaucracies in place. But with virtual machines and their explosion in popularity and deployment, it really can strain your traditional backup processes. You're now not using some of the latest APIs for protection. You're just using typical LAN backups. And it's also increasing your storage consumption on the back end, where if you're just using tapes, now you've got dozens or hundreds or thousands of virtual machines that are all just spewing their data to tape. And we'll talk a lot about how obviously there's a lot of duplication in that data. And so virtualization really kind of exaggerates or exasperates these problems that you've had in the physical world, but they're coming at you so much faster now because it's so much easier to deploy virtual machines. So it really does strain your existing data protection practices and procedures. And the last one on traditional recovery really speaks to the fact that, hey, you can restore a virtual machine. It's kind of like a bare metal restore, and that's something that probably in the past you don't have necessarily a practice or a policy to deal with that. If it's one thing, if somebody's entire physical machine goes down, you know how to do that. But if they want a copy of a virtual machine or bring up a virtual machine on a different host, those are all kind of pushing the envelope a little bit in terms of your bureaucracy, your data protection portal, if you will. So we're here today to represent Symantec. and represent the fact that Symantec's got a couple of fantastic products for helping you address those problems, and then also position you for the future deployments in cloud protection, and as we're all here this week to learn about that, and how we can position yourselves for using the latest technologies. So between NetBackup and BackupExec, Symantec is the #1 market leader in data protection above all other vendors. And if you read across the top row, you can see that both on the enterprise side, on the Fortune 500, 1000, we're a predominant vendor in use in some of the biggest companies in the world. And yet on the left here, even with this medium to small business, BackupExec is being deployed by literally 1.5 million licenses have been sold. So it's quite a breadth of protection that we offer, from the largest of users through the medium business to the smallest. So I'm sure between those two products we can have something that works for your environments. And then also, regardless of the kind of business you are, whether you're a financial business or a government business or a medical business or a consulting firm or even a hosting firm, all of our products are used in those environments today, and quite successfully, and we've got a great history there. So the one last part that we'll talk about, besides the Symantec products being so fantastic in the data protection realm, we've also been a partner with VMware for many years. In fact, kind of prior to us being Symantec in the Veritas days, and before and after the EMC presence in the VMware days, we're still developing some of the best technologies for data protection of VMware and of virtual machines, as well as this week we'll have some new product introductions in the HA space and the storage space that you can hear about Wednesday. I believe it's, I've got it at the end here. I think it's Wednesday around noon, or maybe in the morning. It's our super session from Symantec, and there'll be some product introductions there too. So all of the business or lines of business within Symantec are definitely focusing on and partnering with VMware. And what that provides you as an end user or VMware administrator is the fact that our products here, specifically BackupExec 2010 and 2010 R2 and NetBackup 7, are both tightly integrated with the latest releases of VMware, including vSphere 4 and vSphere 4.1. And part of that same message is that our products have been tested through VMware's VMware Ready program, which means there's a third party that exercises our products using vStorage APIs and make sure that they're qualified and meet the performance and integration standards that the testing that they're put through for testing. So both BackupExec and NetBackup prior versions, as well as the latest versions, are VMware Ready and VMware compliant. So I'll spend the next few minutes talking about the latest release of NetBackup, NetBackup 7, and introducing to some of the features there. Is anybody in the room using NetBackup 7? Okay. Anybody using 6.5 or something like earlier? Okay. Okay. Well, again, feel free to interject any questions. So with NetBackup 7, actually, we just this week are releasing 7.0.1, and it will, I believe it'll be available for you when you get back from this week and your Labor Day weekend. You should be able to find it available for download. And that actually is our latest NetBackup release, which supports vSphere 4.1, and NetBackup 7 supports vSphere 4. So NetBackup 7 for VMware, really just at a high level, obviously we've done a much better job in speeding virtual machine backup. We'll talk about that. We also are able to recover files out of virtual machine backup images from regardless of what kind of storage you're using. So whether you're using tape storage or disk storage or even dedupe storage, we can recover individual files from those backup images from whatever backup storage they reside upon. So I'll read off the screen here, but these are some of the more the keynote aspects or the prominent aspects of NetBackup 7. So in NetBackup 6.5, we introduced support for VMware using what everybody infamously knows as VCB, or Consolidated Backup. And that was really the first generation of VMware backup APIs or backup infrastructure. And so NetBackup 7 is now integrated with vStorage APIs, which are the latest in the VMware API stack for data protection. But I guess my message is that if you're using VCB today with NetBackup 6 or 6.5, you can upgrade to NetBackup 7 pretty much seamlessly and still use VCB. And so you don't have to upgrade VMware and NetBackup at the same time. You can install NetBackup 7, and it will work with your existing, let's say, VI3 infrastructure. And then as you find time and is scheduled to upgrade to vSphere, NetBackup 7 can support both. In both deployments within your organization. One of the big improvements in the vStorage APIs is that, or I should really say one of the deficits of using VCB was that it was really a copy mechanism. It wasn't really a snapshot mechanism. It would use a snapshot but then copy it to that proxy server, and that's where the backup happened. Well, that copy is now gone, and we're now able to back up directly from the snapshot. And so that alone is quite a performance enhancement, and I'll speak to some of the capabilities that we have in a couple of slides here. And then I mentioned already we can already support and continue to support your existing VCB deployments. So with some of the vSphere enhancements, we now also support block level incremental. Prior to this, NetBackup supported file level incremental, which was, again, something that very few vendors did. We supported VM backups and then associated file level incremental. Now we also support block level incremental, which is part of vStorage. Yep. Yeah, I'll actually talk about that in just a slide. And then and I'll come back to you and ask you which one you want. File level recovery from Windows in a single pass backup. So again, we can back up an entire Windows virtual machine, and regardless of what backup storage, restore files from that. It's called the shredder option. You won't see that in any product literature, but it's just something easy to speak to. We actually, because when we back up the virtual machine and we identify the files, we are smart enough to know about the NTFS file system there. So we are not backing up any deleted files. And actually, if you look at some competitive products, if you create an NTFS file system and you delete a gigabyte, you'll find out that when you back up that NTFS VM, there's a gigabyte of dead space in there. And it has nothing to do with vStorage and vStorage APIs. This is NTFS basically just kind of keeping those blocks allocated but deleted. So as we perform that backup, we skip those blocks. So we really do give you the smallest, most efficient VM image that you need for data protection. We also support global deduplication of Windows files, which I'll talk about here shortly in a slide. But that means that regardless of whether you're backing up virtual Windows machines or physical Windows machines, if they're going to the same dedupe storage, only one copy of those blocks are being stored in your backup storage. So our solution is not exclusive to virtual machines. As you'll see here, we offer a seamless protection between physical and virtual machines, and not a VMware-only solution. And then lastly, we talked about stageless backup and recovery for files. Our recovery doesn't include or require any kind of staging of the virtual machine. We're recovering directly from our backup storage and only the data that we need. Okay. So here's a little bit of a pictorial view of what we do just kind of out of the box for any virtual machine. So it's maybe not the best illustration, but you can see those are individual VMDKs, and here's the ESX host, and here's the backup server with the backup storage, either disk or tape. And so without an agent in the virtual machines here, the agent actually essentially lives down here, and that's the power of vStorage APIs, that we can back up any of those virtual machines without any kind of software footprint in those virtual machines. And it supports full and incremental backup, of course, and it works with any kind of backup destination, disk or tape. And in a few minutes, we'll also show how it works with deduplicated storage. So that's our, regardless of what kind of guest you're running, that's the protection that you have available to you. Now, if you're running Windows, there's actually some additional protection or additional features that we provide, and that's the ability to recover individual files from these virtual machines. So we already talked about how they get backed up, and as that virtual machine image sits here or sits on tape, we can recover just individual files back to those virtual machines, or actually it could be back to physical machines for that matter. It's direct from your VM backup. It's direct from whatever kind of backup storage you're using here. And all files are cataloged. And really what I'm trying to say there is the restore process is no different than the physical restore process. This is exactly the same restore browser and cataloging that's used to catalog our physical servers and physical files as well. So there's no new training, there's no new procedures you have to do. All we're making it is so that you don't have to do twice as many backups, like a VMDK kind of a backup, followed by individual user file backups. And we're also making it so that you don't have to deploy clients or agents in all your file systems, or file servers that are virtualized. And so now let's switch gears a little bit and talk about deduplication. If you think back about that 2 slides ago where I said what you can do with the backup protection that you get with any virtual machine here. Well, now NetBackup supports deduplication here in our backup server. And so we have a product that's called PureDisk, and PureDisk has now been fully integrated into our NetBackup storage servers or backup servers. And so PureDisk is now a technology rather than a product, and it allows us to deduplicate across virtual machines, as we'll see here. So just for any operating system, any guest OS here, we will deduplicate the VMDK files, which is pretty standard. So within your VM block 1 to VM block N, oops, sorry, went too fast there. That's the level that it's not going to let me go back, but that's the level that the deduplication happens at. Now for our Windows, again, there's some enhanced functionality for Windows virtual machines, and what you'll see is that now we're not, got to get the clickers, got too many clickers up here. Now we're actually deduplicating the guest files themselves, whether they're data files or system files. And so it's essentially allowing us to deduplicate at sub-file levels, not viewing things as a VMDK, but viewing files as they exist on the NTFS file system. And so you can see the deduplication is happening at a file level, or actually a sub-file level here. And we'll deduplicate between VMs on the same host, or between hosts, or even better yet, physical machines here and virtual machines there. As these identical files are identified by our deduplicated storage, we're only storing one copy of those blocks of those data. And so that's something that you get by using our deduplicated storage option. We call it our media server deduplication pool in NetBackup 7. So that's great technology, but what does it really mean? So we did some tests, and we've done a couple of rounds of tests, and we have a presentation on Tuesday and Thursday that's done by George Winter, where he goes into this in great detail, and I've actually borrowed just a couple of slides from his presentation. But I encourage you, I've got the number of his presentation at the end of ours. But so it's tomorrow and Thursday you can go and see. But we did these tests with VCB first. We just tried to back up virtual machines using VCB, and our throughput was about, or our effective backup rate was about 63 megabytes a second. Now, without changing anything other than not using VCB and now using vStorage, we achieved, using NetBackup 7 with the vStorage APIs, just going to disk storage, plain old vanilla disk backups, we achieved about 450 megabytes a second of effective throughput. And then one last step, we simply re-provisioned the same disk to be used as our deduplication storage, our media server dedupe pool, and then the effective throughput rate went up to about 600 megabytes a second. So you can see that what this is really saying is, even if we're reading the deduplicated blocks and sending it to the media server, there's still an effective throughput improvement because we're not doing any I/O on that media server, and essentially we're throwing away some of the duplicate blocks. So what does that mean besides performance? Well, if you tried to measure it, what it truly means is you'll be able to back up more. Or I'm guessing that everybody's, we talked about earlier, everybody's machines are proliferating and you're getting more and more copies. So if you kind of take this and you give it these numbers, that you have a backup window of about 60 hours and your average VM size was about 40 gigs and your average data change is about 5%. Using VCB, you could back up about 340 VMs. And then if you upgrade to NetBackup 7 and just use plain old disk, you'll see it's almost a 7-fold performance. And we've seen that in a kind of an informal test and a more structured formal test. And then if you use dedupe storage, you'll see that that actually goes up more like 9-fold. So what this really means is by using not only NetBackup 7, but the integrated deduplication in NetBackup 7, that you can see you almost get a 10-fold performance improvement from using VCB and prior versions of NetBackup. So in the end, all this technology means that as your number of virtual machines grows, you don't have to worry about all that extra capacity on disk or finding more backup storage, that by enabling deduplication, and using NetBackup 7, you'll get both faster and more efficiently stored virtual machines. And that's an interesting point, as you should kind of remember, deduplication isn't just about saving storage, it's also about reducing time. You're writing less data, so your backups take less time. And so I'll kind of finish here before I hand it over to Peter with just some positive customer quotes. And I'll just, the most interesting one, or one of the more positive ones, is a gentleman using NetBackup 655. He talks about using VCB. It took 16 minutes to complete. And the exact same thing after upgrading NetBackup 7 took 6 minutes. So again, that's like a 3-fold, 2.5-fold performance improvement in just the time alone. And that's I don't think that was using deduplication. That's just the big, using vStorage and NetBackup 7. So any questions about NetBackup? Your question, I will get to it. It's actually in a Futures slide that's coming right after Pete talks. So, okay.
Thanks, Brian. Sure. Great question. So the question for the audience was, the deduplication technology that Brian just talked about in NetBackup, is that a proprietary Symantec technology, or is that a vStorage API? The answer is that it's actually Symantec proprietary technology based upon a product called PureDisk. But I think it's important to know that Symantec, our tagline for deduplication is open deduplication. So we ship in both NetBackup and in BackupExec 2010 the same exact deduplication engine. So it's actually the same technology that's deduplicating both NetBackup and BackupExec. And so the choice is always yours to use Symantec deduplication. But at the same time, it's important to understand that we don't lock you into our deduplication technology. One of the technologies that also is shared by both NetBackup and BackupExec is called Symantec Open Storage Technology. And OST, for short, OST allows you to use third-party hardware-based deduplication devices. So if you like Data Domain, another great EMC company, and you want to use that with NetBackup or BackupExec, no problem. That'll allow you to offload that deduplication processing onto the appliance. If you like Exagrid, great, you can use that. If you like Quantum, great, Falcon Store. We give you really the vendor choice, whoever you like out there for your deduplication needs, because we are kind of like Switzerland. We have no formal hardware agenda, so we want you to use whatever hardware you want to use in your environment, provided that you use it with Symantec, BackupExec, or NetBackup. Does that answer your question, though? Okay. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
How would that look as far as the solution? Like, am I backing it to one place and then moving it there, or could I do like tape emulation on the quantum and use it as like a VCL? I mean, how would that?
Great question. So if you do like dedupe appliances from either ExeGrid, Data Domain, Quantum, whoever your preference is, what does it look like inside of NetBackup or BackupExec? What we've done is we've created an architecture through this open storage technology that allows us to talk directly to the device. It means you do not have to create a CIF share on that device. It means you do not have to create some sort of VTL interface and make it look like tape. The software is designed to talk directly to the hardware. And so the value of that to you is that inside of NetBackup or inside of BackupExec, you're going to be going in there and adding that device as a deduplication appliance. Both NetBackup and BackupExec will know that it's a Quantum DXi or a Data Domain DD680, 690. It's going to know what that device is. It's going to know how to talk to it. And if you have multiple Quantums in your environment, we support a feature called optimized duplication, so that if you have 2 Quantum DXi appliances in 2 different locations, and you have 2 BackupExec servers at those 2 locations, you can actually then tell the Quantum device, take a copy of backup over here on A and replicate it, but keep it all deduplicated to media server or BackupExec server B, and both NetBackup and BackupExec support that. The advantage to you is that if you're replicating across a WAN, those Quantum devices are going to be very efficient in moving just the deduplicated data across the WAN. So that optimized duplication feature is a really nice value-add capability in the open storage technology. And that's not something you're going to find really from any of the other vendors out there. Does that answer your question about the Quantums? Okay. Okay, and again, so my name's Pete, that's Brian. I know it was lunchtime, we kind of got in here a little bit off cycle. If you have questions, though, we would much rather be up here and answering your questions and having a conversation with you than going through slides. You guys can read the slides on the long plane rides back home to wherever home may be. So if you have questions, shout them out. We're going to try and give away a couple of gift cards at the end, so please give us a shot at answering your questions. Yes, ma'am. How does it work with Oracle? If you have Oracle inside of a virtual machine? Okay, great question. So both BackupExec and NetBackup have some capability to back up virtual applications inside of VMs. One of the advantages of applications that are VSS compliant, such as Exchange, Active Directory, Microsoft SQL, is that we can quiesce and basically put those applications into a backup mode when we do a backup of an entire virtual machine. That's actually one of the key features that we're going to show you here today. But, and there's always a catch, it doesn't support every application. The application has to be VSS compliant. Oracle does have a VSS writer. We are working with them on that, but as of today, we currently do not have integrated VSS support for Oracle inside of a virtual machine, which simply means that, like the gentleman up here in the front, you would have an agent inside of that virtual machine, and you would essentially back up that Oracle database as if it were a physical Oracle server. Both NetBackup and BackupExec have Oracle agent, and actually it's a lot of the same technology between the two. So, is it Oracle on Windows or on Linux? Both, okay. So both NetBackup and BackupExec will be able to meet your needs by putting an agent inside of that guest virtual machine, Windows or Linux. So SQL, Exchange, and Active Directory are a little bit different for BackupExec. And what happens with those is a technology that we're going to talk about here in a little bit called our Granular Recovery Technology, Application Granular Recovery Technology, GRT. What that technology allows us to do is back up those virtual machines that have those virtualized applications inside of them in a single pass. Which means that you would not do a traditional agent-level backup of those applications inside of your virtual machines. This is also unique to Symantec. It's something you're not going to find in a lot of the other backup products, really of any other backup product out there. What we're offering is basically the capability, to use those same vStorage APIs that Brian talked about, that VMware has provided all the vendors. It gives you that fast, full backup, fast incremental, fast block differential backups. But our secret sauce, our value add to you at Symantec is if you have those types of applications inside of those virtual machines, we still require you to purchase and put an agent in there, but he only runs for about 60 seconds during the backup, and then he goes away. And what he does is gather some metadata for us so that we can basically give you a nice consolidated view. When you go to the restore view, if you want to recover the entire VM, great. If you want to recover an individual email, an individual database, a calendar item, a contact item, an Active Directory user account, you can do that without having to restore the entire VM. Yes, sir? SharePoint. Oh, what a good question. We've got some of our SharePoint engineers here in the room, some of our VMware engineers in the room. I have it on a reasonable suspicion that we will be supporting SharePoint in the very near future is our hope. So today that granular technology for virtual machines, it's really for SQL, Exchange, and Active Directory. Now, what that means is that technology just can't be used inside of a VM as part of vStorage. But for SharePoint level backups, just put an agent in there and do a traditional SharePoint backup, and then you can get back SharePoint documents, lists, wiki pages, sites, security intact. So we do have a great SharePoint agent. It's just not integrated into the vStorage capabilities yet. Does that answer your question? Okay, great. So a lot of the features are common between both NetBackup and BackupExec. So we'll do our best to kind of highlight just the small differences that are there. But for the most part, both NetBackup and BackupExec, we have a common engineering team. We're working very hard to make sure that the feature set is very similar between the two products, so that if you are a large heterogeneous environment, large data centers, NetBackup is there, and it's going to have the same feature set as if you were a BackupExec customer with more distributed, more of a Windows focused. So that's really kind of how we separate the two products. But like Brian said, we do support and are VMware Ready certified for both vSphere 4.1, vCenter 4.1, and obviously the vStorage APIs. It also means that ESXi is fully supported. So if you are running the console-less version, no problem. There's never an agent that you actually have to install on the BackupExec server. So I'll show you what that looks like here. So it's simply a license key that you put on the BackupExec server for the VMware agent for BackupExec. There's never actually any agent installed on the ESX host itself. There's not a console agent. There's nothing there that you have to put on the ESX server. It's designed to go talk to vCenter or go talk to the host directly, get a list of all the virtual machines that are there, get a list of, if you've got folders and you're grouping them in vCenter, what do the folders look like, what is your folder structure, your grouping, your organization, and give you a nice clean browse list of which virtual machines you want to go and select from. The advantage that we've got, again, is that since there's no agent there, ESXi and ESX are both supported. vCenter is supported. If you don't have vCenter, no problem. We can talk directly to the hosts. It's really kind of whatever you have in your environment. Yes, sir?
I actually use the agent backup for Exchange right now.
Okay.
It requires the host to be 64-bit because you have to have the Exchange console running on it. But my media server connects the tape to 32-bit. Would this process where you're backing up the VM work on Exchange 2000 or Exchange 2010, but just backing up the VM?
Great question. So the question was, he has a 32-bit BackupExec server today. Does he have to go to a 64-bit? Also asked about Exchange 2010 support as well. So we did just release a new version of BackupExec 2010. It's BackupExec 2010 R2. Now, some of the capabilities are 64-bit only, and this holds true for both NetBackup and BackupExec. Deduplication is definitely one of them. So if you liked what you saw about deduplication, that does require a 64-bit media server. The only time it does not require a 64-bit media server is if you have a quantum DXi device and you want to use that open storage technology. That can still be a 32-bit BackupExec server. But for the generally speaking, you need a 64-bit media server. But to answer your question specifically, the VMware agent does not require a 64-bit BackupExec server. So you can back up that entire virtual machine and have the ability to do that from a 32-bit BackupExec server. Sure.
Actually, I have an open ticket for Samantha on this. The virtual machine that have virtual disks across different data stores tend to have quiescing problems. So I've actually had to use the agent backup for Exchange. I couldn't do a VM backup because it was on, the C drive was on one data store, the D drive was on another, on the log directory, yet on another data store.
It's been a really common problem. So the question was, I've had some quiescing problems, snapshotting my virtual machines, especially if there's an application in there. This is something that's pretty common, actually, you see out there with a lot of applications that aren't quiescing correctly. It's gotten to the point now where, and actually inside of BackupExec, on these virtual machines that are running applications like SQL, Exchange, or Active Directory, if you're interested in that granular recovery capability, and there needs to be a BackupExec agent in there, one of the components of the agent that we now by default install is a semantic-specific VSS provider. So that piece may or may not be on your virtual machines, but that really is the piece that really enables us to, what we feel, provide the best chance at quiescing that application, talking to the VSS writer on that particular virtual machine, and making sure that it's ready for backup and ready for recovery. So that piece, if it's not there, that's one of the things that we've struggled with mightily. In fact, in the R2 version, our latest release, it will actually go and uninstall the VSS provider from VMware inside of the virtual machine from VMware Tools, and we'll install the Symantec one. We think it provides obviously, well, in our opinion, a better chance at quiescing that application. We've had better luck with ours, and we've told VMware that. In fact, if someday, if ours ends up inside of the VMware Tools package as the default version, we'd be more than happy to make that available. So we're going to talk with VMware and see if that's... It's BackupExec right now, and then the NetBackup team is taking that exact same code and looking at it right now. So eventually, I believe it will be both. Mm-hmm. Does that answer your question? Okay. So this is, again, something that we've worked hard on. I wanted to show a little bit of what it looks like inside of BackupExec. We've spent a lot of time working on the look and the feel. And the real value of both NetBackup and BackupExec is really that you can back up both physical and virtual machines. We know you have a lot of choices out there for virtual machine backup. There's a lot of virtual-only small backup vendors out there, and some of them have great products. We're not here to dismiss any of them. But one of the things that you should consider when you're virtualizing large sections of your data center and you're investing in VMware for that cost savings, part of the cost savings should be in your backup redesign plans. Instead of buying traditional BackupExec or NetBackup agents or clients for each of your virtual machines, the way these products are licensed now is per host. So you're not having to buy a Windows agent or a Linux agent any longer to put inside of each of those guest virtual machines. The value of that is it's much lower total cost to you as part of your virtualization effort. If you're virtualizing the safe hardware costs, power costs, cooling costs, think about backup redesign as part of those costs that you could potentially save by moving to either the NetBackup for VMware client or also the BackupExec agent for VMware. Yes, sir?
I'm just trying to make sure you said both of those products are licensed by host.
By host. That's exactly right. So tell us how many hosts you have out there, and that's how many licenses you need. Yes, sir. So the question is, what about the databases, SQL, Exchange, Active Directory? Brian's got expensive taste, big cars, fancy shoes, so we have to keep charging for the database agents a little bit there. So those still require a little bit of a license from you. Yes. So yes, every single Exchange server, SQL server will require a license for BackupExec. For NetBackup, it's just
It's still actually by host for NetBackup, but there's just an additional license. So one gets you file level backup and recovery, and then the additional license gets you application protection per host. It's kind of, at this point in time, NetBackup doesn't have the application granular recovery. And that's one of the differences with BackupExec is you're paying, in essence, for things like application, SQL, and Exchange granular recovery within your VM.
So this is what does that answer your question? Okay. This is what it looks like inside of BackupExec. You'll see a little node in the tree there for vCenter. Give us the IP address of that vCenter server, and we'll automatically then go and discover all of the ESX hosts and all of the virtual machines underneath that vCenter installation. The other thing that we'll offer you is the ability to back up your template files. This came from a direct piece of customer feedback. Customers wanted to be able to back up their template files just alongside of the virtual machines that they create from those templates. So that's one of the other things that you'll now see underneath that same vCenter host is all of your templates as well. Okay. Once you've selected the virtual machines you wanted to back up, once you select the what, this is kind of the how. This is basically the choice that you make on how that data is going to be protected and moved across your network. Both NetBackup and BackupExec have these same features where you choose the type of storage you want and the type of infrastructure you want those backups to go across. If you're a SAN-based customer, iSCSI, Fiber Channel, it doesn't matter. You like EqualLogic, great. Clarion, great. Whatever the case may be, we can back up across the SAN. Again, there's no agent that's required to be on that ESX host. You would simply allocate the disk volumes to that BackupExec server or NetBackup server, and they would show up in Disk Manager as unknown volumes. And as long as there's SAN connectivity between the two, you'll be able to back up that data right over the SAN. If you don't have a SAN, no problem. Network-based backups are supported, as well as the hot add feature if you are virtualizing your NetBackup or your BackupExec media server. So you can fully virtualize your backup application server as well, which might be something else to consider if you want to move towards a 64-bit BackupExec server. Tape will give you a little bit of problems if you want to virtualize the tape piece, but it is great for disk-based backup. Here's where you would choose what type of granular recovery technology you would want, and also what type of backup, whether it's a full, an incremental, a differential. Now, this is the piece that we kind of talked about a little bit earlier. This is the actual granular recovery. So again, it's a single pass backup of those virtual machines. We gather the information about the application, quiesce it, and then give you the ability to recover individual mailboxes, messages, calendar items, contact items, all within inside of the BackupExec UI. You can select either the entire virtual machine to recover, you can select individual disks to recover, or if you want, you can actually recover individual application objects, user accounts, mailboxes, messages, that type of thing, all from within the same restore view. So you can recover the entire virtual machine or these applications. This is, again, unique to Symantec. You're not going to find this. There's some vendors out there claiming to have this type of ability, but you're going to have two different products and usually two different backups to accomplish the same thing. We're going to offer it both for physical and virtual, tape or disk, and also for SQL Exchange and Active Directory.
Is it possible to sample our customers? Can I let them suggest their virtual machine or the question?
The question was, is there a restore view for customers? If you're a partner, or if you want to provide your end users the ability to have their own custom restore view, the answer is actually no on that. Although we've had a lot of requests for some sort of guided individual VM restore, we have that a lot for some file and folder capabilities as well as emails. So you could have that type of view through a web browser or a web-based restore view, but we don't have it for virtual machines. So if that's something you'd like to see, definitely come up and talk to us about that. We'd love to know more about that. Deduplication, again, same engine, same technology in both NetBackup and BackupExec. It allows us to recover really any of those virtual machines out of that deduplicated storage location. We just also wanted to give you some best practices. We didn't want this to be a complete marketing session on Symantec products. Some of the capabilities that are introduced in vSphere 4, they make life great, but they also make it a little bit difficult in some cases to back up correctly. And what we wanted to focus on was probably the bottom three bullet points. Fault-tolerant VMs, this is something that comes up a lot. Those cannot be backed up through vStorage right now. So that's just one thing to consider. You have to basically break the fault-tolerant configuration in order to take a snapshot of those virtual machines. So that's something that I think everyone should be aware of when you're looking at a vStorage-enabled backup solution is fault-tolerant VMs, if you're using those, they're not going to work correctly. In that case, with the fault-tolerant VM, you want to go back to your traditional agent inside of a guest virtual machine type backup operation. RDM physical compatibility mode disks. If you're using RDM disks, the virtual compatibility mode RDMs can be backed up, but they do cause difficulty on restore. RDMs that are physical and independent disks, those cannot be snapshotted at all, and they will not even be seen by the backup software. So in both cases, both for physical and virtual RDMs, the recommendation from Symantec would be put an agent in the guest and back it up like a physical machine. Obviously, we're hoping VMware is going to address these over time, but we wanted to point out that these are some of the current limitations that are even in vSphere 4.1 when it comes to vStorage API backups of your virtual machines. VApp objects, also difficult to back up right now. So if you're using VApp, it's something that we're working on with VMware, but right now it is somewhat difficult to back those VApp objects up and restore them correctly. Okay, deduplication. This is specific, obviously, to Symantec. If you're wanting to put an agent inside of the guest virtual machine and run an agent-level backup, you want to give him at least 2 cores because we're going to grab one of those cores for the deduplication processing. If you like deduplication for your BackupExec or your NetBackup media server, 64-bit is the recommendation, and a quad core for that media server to do the deduplication. But if you like to off-host that even further and put that on appliance, data domain, Exagrid, Quantum, they'd be more than happy to sell you a dedicated deduplication appliance. Okay, any questions about any of this? The last thing I wanted to mention is all of the vStorage API goodness that comes with vStorage, the incremental, the block level differentials, the 1 to 2% CPU hit during the backup. vStorage really is a great technology. But I think it's probably one of our biggest misconceptions that we run across with customers, that you have to be on vSphere 4 to get vStorage APIs. That is not correct. If you are on 3.5 update 2 or later, vStorage API goodness applies to you. And you can use all of the features that we talked about with the exception of the incremental and differential block level backups. But all of the other features, those are there in the vStorage API present in ESX 3.5, update 2, and later. Okay? So now we've got a couple of futures here we're going to kind of run through with you guys. Oh, did you have a question?
Just a version question.
Sure.
I'm actively using BackupExec 2010.
Okay.
vSphere 4.
Okay.
Looking to go to 4.1. Are you recommending going to R2 now?
Yes, you would definitely need to go to R2 to be supported. It's a free upgrade. It'll install right over the top. If you're a BackupExec customer and you want to go to our latest R2 version, it'll use your same license keys. No fuss, no muss. Okay. So we've got a couple of neat stuff to show you, and this is something that our engineers that are in the room here are actually working on right now. And Brian's going to take you through a couple of the items here, and I think this goes back to your other platform single file restore piece.
Yeah, so we have been working on this for a while, and we are planning to release it in next year in what I'll just call as NetBackup vNext. Is our file level recovery for Linux virtual machines. So it's the same type of description for Windows. It's just that we'll be supporting Red Hat and SUSE and ext2 and 3 and the existing logical volume manager implementations in those OSs. So we're working on those now, and we anticipate that we'll add ext4 to the list eventually. That turns out to be a little bit different than our existing implementation. So we're working on that. And is there anybody using guest operating or guest file systems besides Windows or Linux ext2 or 3 that really they need file level recovery? It's like a big percentage of their virtual machines they deploy? Or does that?
Only in the sense of a web server, web farm, running on CentOS.
Oh, okay. Sure. Okay, well, that's good to know. Yeah, so unfortunately for us, there's so many flavors of Linux, right, that we're trying to go with the top two, so to speak, and as we roll this out, but it's not to say we won't consider others like CentOS in the future. Another thing that we're concentrating on and building currently is you see some of this in our product today. We have a pretty good wizard.
Question as well.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I think it goes back to your question earlier about the
about how to host this. So the question earlier was about is there any potential for if you're a host provider for making this available to your customers? Well, it'd probably show up in what's going to be kind of our recovery portal. We are building today. We have it in our wizards. You just go through and say, I want to restore a VM, and we have a very nice wizard that shows up. But it's either in your Windows GUI or your Java GUI. And this is actually going to be more part of a NetBackup portal where you'll be able to look at various applications and say, I'd like to recover, for instance, this virtual machine, and it'll step you through. And it'll be really designed for your virtual machine administrators, not your backup administrators, so that you can delegate. I mean, I'm not talking to a backup convention here, but backup admins tend to have to deal with making sure they've got all their machines covered and that they're all being protected. So all the requests for recovery tend to go through them as well, but they're not the application people, they're just the backup and the protection people. So they may not know how to recover a virtual machine or all the intricacies of that. So this is actually built as kind of what's the right word, a protocol or a procedure where you can go in, think of it almost more like your shopping cart kind of a mechanism where they can select virtual machines, and then you can configure it as to whether you're going to need approval before they can run the restore, like maybe approval from a backup admin, or they could just go ahead and run it right away. And we're going to help coach them and make sure it gets done right the first time. And then lastly, again, another thing, again, we're working on it. It didn't make our NetBackup 7 release, but it'll definitely be in our next release. It's just an improvement in terms of policies. Right now, we do have integration with vCenter and vStorage by allowing you to browse which virtual machines and which hosts you'd like to back up. But in the end, it all ends up being a list of virtual machines that are protected. So these rules will be made. We're actually going to build a rules engine in there where you can actually say, I just like to protect all the virtual machines on this host or all the virtual machines that are using this LUN, and initially make sure that you can essentially point out different locations or different characteristics, and we will automatically just figure out how many virtual machines are on that device or that location at that backup time and back them up. So at Monday it might be 10 virtual machines on a host, and it might be double that on Tuesday, and it might have some other number on Wednesday, and we'll still obviously make that a much more dynamic selection process. So those are things that are currently in our hopper. It's definitely a short-term kind of description, and I'll probably just leave it at that. And I will maybe hand it back to Pete, because he's got some things for BackupExec he wants to talk about. But we will be in the Semantic booth later today from like 4 until 7, so we'll be happy to talk more about that. Yeah.
Question?
Yes.
So my assumption is that some of the backup rules or recovery rules will be one thing also. They're aware of the example host community and other features that we have to use.
Well, so this is a future, just so you know. So this will be in a future release of NetBackup, and what we'll be essentially targeting is so that you can say, okay, if I understand your question correctly, you'll be able to say back up all the machines on host 1. And today our configuration list is more virtual machine 1, virtual machine 2, virtual machine 3. It's similar to NetBackup. NetBackup backs up clients or the actual physical or virtual machines. So this is we're kind of pushing the boundaries of NetBackup and how NetBackup does selection. There's a little bit of precedence in this. When NetBackup backs up SharePoint farms, it'll go out and discover the farm in its entirety. It does the same thing now with Exchange. As Exchange grows into these, clustered active passive kind of roles, it figures out what it's supposed to back up in Exchange. So this is an extension to that, but you, in the end, will not be saying back up a specific virtual machine. You'll be saying back up like all the VMs on LUN XYZ or all the VMs on ESX Server 2. Does that answer your question?
Well, then I go to restore that. If I have host integrity rules, we're saying I'm not going to restore a specific host.
The restores are going to be through the portal, which will be based more at a VM level. You won't be recovering necessarily an entire host if that's.
But one of the things that you'll have the ability to do right now in both NetBackup 7 and BackupExec 2010 is the ability to redirect a virtual machine to a different data store, a different host. You can give it a different name. You can put them on a different network if there's a test network. So the redirection is in there today. You can back him up and even restore him to a local file system like d:/Brian, and we'll just put the VM DKs in that directory. So we'll give you a lot of ability on the restore on where you want to actually put that data back to. You can put them in different folders, different data stores, just about anywhere. Does that answer your question, though? No.
Oh, well, why don't you, we'll take it offline and talk to you right after this.
The other thing that we're actually demoing in the booth that we hope you'll enjoy and hopefully tell us we're doing a good job on or a bad job on is we're adding a plugin to vCenter or the vSphere client to allow you to monitor the status of your backups inside of vCenter. So it will be a small little plugin that you'll install inside of the client or inside of vCenter, and it will give you the ability to see the status of all of your virtual machines and their backup status. You can right-click on them and exclude them from the backup. You can right-click on them and view the job log. But it provides you the ability, or your VMware admins, if that's you or the guy sitting next to you, allows them to see the backup status without ever having to leave the vCenter console. And it'll show you the last time it was protected, whether or not the backup succeeded or the backup failed, and also when the next scheduled occurrence is going to run for that particular virtual machine. BackupExec does have the ability to dynamically include newly created virtual machines. So if you're a vCenter customer and you have 5 virtual machines on Monday, you run your backup Monday night, you back up 5, you add 5 more on Tuesday. BackupExec will go ahead and back up then 10 virtual machines when that backup runs Tuesday night. So this view will constantly get refreshed and updated as you add and subtract virtual machines in your environment, and we'll show you the backup status of each of those virtual machines. We are showing this in the booth this week, so if you want to check it out, please come over and tell us what you think, good or bad. We'd love to hear about it. We're also going to be adding this capability called Virtual Instant Recovery, which allows you to have 2 copies of the backup, one on the BackupExec server and one on an alternate ESX host. And it basically is there for instant recovery. It will allow you to take backups of physical or virtual machines and keep a virtual machine ready to go on that second ESX host at all time. If you have 2 ESX hosts and you want them to replicate between each other, this Virtual Instant Recovery replication piece is something that we're working on now. And allow you to basically keep virtual machines sort of in sync and managed by the backup application. So this will be sometime next year, but we'll be going into beta hopefully soon. So if you like what you see here, please, again, stop by the booth. We'd love to show and talk to you about some of the capabilities that we're working on. Okay, we are wrapping up. We have a couple of giveaways to give you guys. I'm going to go through a couple of cloud pieces here, but really I think we're pretty much out of time here. As far as the cloud piece goes, the real thing that we're here to talk about just really quickly is the ability to move away from tapes on a truck architecture. We know a lot of you have been putting tapes on trucks for years, and that's worked well. What Symantec is looking to do now is to take all of the backups that either NetBackup or BackupExec generate, and instead of putting those on tapes on trucks to facilities, essentially rent your BackupExec servers or your NetBackup servers and rent that cloud storage from really any of the cloud storage vendors that you prefer. Again, we're Switzerland in most cases where we're cloud vendor neutral. If you like Terramark, great. If you like Amazon, great. Again, our hope is that you'll just trust NetBackup or BackupExec to safeguard your data and to put it on that cloud storage location. Yes, sir.
Any conversations with the existing archival stuff like Iron Mountain, would they be in the loop to provide cloud storage to them? See, that would be the obvious solution. They're the most secure. Everyone goes and sends their stuff there anyway. Are they going to be doing the cloud storage?
If you're reading what I'm not saying, yes. So yes, they're definitely someone we want to talk to and have a story with, and because basically you're asking us to. So that's exactly the type of confirmation and feedback we're looking for. Right. So if you like Iron Mountain, great. We really want to stay neutral in all of that and give you the choice. If you like Iron Mountain, fantastic. We just hope, again, you'll trust either BackupExec or NetBackup to put the data out there and manage it. And that's really the piece that we're working on now. And I skipped over this slide a little bit. But that's the essential goal, is you can use whatever cloud technology you want. If you want to build your own private cloud off of vCloud, and use it to create your storage locations and use that to put the data to from either NetBackup or BackupExec, great. We're working now to build the products that will essentially talk to the cloud components, so that if you like Amazon, you're not having to go outside of the application to go provision the storage. If you like Iron Mountain, you're not having to go call Iron Mountain up and say, hey, I need to restore some data. Can you send me back a disk? You should be able to do all of that within the application and request the transfer drives to and from the cloud. So those are the pieces that we're working on now to sort of cloudify the products and make sure that they meet your need for really whatever storage vendor that you have a particular interest in. Okay, and that's really some of the advantages that we're looking at the cloud piece. The on-demand stuff, it's great. Amazon, 10 cents for a gig, so 100 gigs of data, $10 a month. There's a lot of advantages out there in storing that data in the cloud, and as opposed to putting a 64-bit BackupExec server necessarily in your environment if you don't want to invest in hardware and software to build that BackupExec server on-premise. One of the pieces that we'll have for you is the ability to do an on-demand rental of a BackupExec server in one of the cloud vendors of your choice, so that he can be up there as essentially a target for your optimized duplicated backups. That piece the deduplication piece and the on-demand piece really are the advantage where you're backing up essentially more data than ever, but you're actually storing less data than you were a week ago, 2 weeks ago, 6 months ago, because it's now being deduplicated and reduced across all of your backup servers. It's not just the incremental or the differential changes from last week. It's actually only the unique data is what's being stored in the cloud that you'll be charged for. Okay, we've got just a couple of links up here for you guys. If you thought Brian and I did a good job and you liked what you saw and you wanted to see more, we've got some links up there: NetBackup, BackupExec, NetBackupDemo.com, our own YouTube channel. We've got now a whole Community Connect site. We've got basically some points to the site that we're going to give away. You trade them in for gift cards, for iPods, whatever you want. And that's Symantec.com/connect.
Yeah. Go ahead. Well, I'm going to give away, we had one gentleman, so this is on Connect, when you participate, you earn points. So here's 100 points. You can log in, and then you can turn in your points for various awards. And I was talking to some of the engineers, I didn't know this, but we recently had some longtime contributors basically refund all their points for a cruise, or cruises, I should say. So it is an authoritative community for NetBackup. You won't find us on Facebook or whatever. I mean, sure, sometimes there's informal links, but Symantec Connect is really the forum where, for all the Symantec products, you'll see some very, very good expertise and blogs and other information. Go ahead, Pete.
If you like Symantec, and hopefully we did an okay job here, we've got some other sessions. Brian mentioned the NetBackup benchmark show. Yeah. That's going to be on Thursday at 10:30 and Tuesday at 3:30. We've also got some HA stories, 1:30 and 4:30 on today and on Wednesday, and then Tuesday at 5 o'clock is really I think one of the best sessions that you'll come across here at VMworld. It's all partnered with Cisco, showing real-world benchmarks on the stuff Brian and I showed you today. How many VMs can you back up? How fast can you back them up? What type of hardware do you need? I think it's one of the best sessions that you'll see here this week. So if you have time tomorrow, Tuesday, 5 o'clock, I think it's one of the best sessions that you'll run across.
Historically, they've been packed. In fact, we were lucky enough to get an automatic repeat this year. So they're well attended. We want to thank you and also let you know that all the things that Pete talked about, the vCenter plugin and the recovery portal and the smart policy rules, are all the user interface people are at the Symantec booth this week, and they'd be more than happy to get your opinions and your feedback on what's in the works. All right, you feel free to come up after this, and we'll stick around for some questions. Thanks for spending your noon hour with us.